We're closing in on the Iowa caucuses. Ryan Priebus, can anyone stop Donald Trump at this point? We saw this big endorsement for Nikki Haley this week from the Koch brothers group, Americans for Prosperity. She seems to be gaining some ground. Does she have time? Is it possible?
Well, she is gaining momentum, but she's still sitting at 30 points down in Iowa, 27 in New Hampshire, 50 points nationally. If Donald Trump's people could map out how this race was going to go, that as someone is getting consolidation, Nikki Haley.
Consolidation?
The governor of Iowa would then endorse Ron
Consolidation?
DeSantis, and then Bob Vanderplatz would endorse Ron DeSantis.
Where have we heard that?
The Koch brothers would now say, we're going to put money behind Nikki Haley. In a primary, to keep in mind, this is a primary in the Republican Party where generally plurality wins every delegate, generally. There are exceptions. Right. You couldn't script it any better. If Donald Trump said, here's how I want this to go,
it's exactly
you could not map this out any better given the primary rules in the Republican Party.
Don, it does seem like deja vu all over again.
Oh,
except he has a majority this time.
But, you know, I want to say something about Mr. DeSantis. These last few weeks, I've been I'm trying to be generous to all of the Republican candidates since Chris Christie is not, you know, capturing the crowd.
Would you give them debate questions too, like Hillary Clinton?
He has completed the full Grassley, all 99 counties. He has the endorsement of the governor. He has the endorsement of the big evangelical leader. So I think he has a good advantage going into the Iowa caucuses because, as you well know, it's all about organization on the ground. You got to get people out on a cold, wintry night to caucus for you. So I give him an advantage, especially with the governors putting her full muscle behind him.
Does not eliminate
Nikki Haley
30
has
points.
capitalized on all of these debates. I said good things about her last week, but this week she is going to face a lot next week. Next week, right?
This week, Donna. This week.
My birthday's coming up, so I'm being forgetful. So, but she has a lot to show this coming week at the debate.
Maggie, Donna pointed out some of the strengths that Ron DeSantis has. At the same time, you've been reporting on endless shakeups in the super PAC supporting him.
I've never seen anything like this. I mean, super PACs are obviously a relatively new existence in politics, but I can't really remember a situation where there's been this rolling series of departures and changes. The campaign had its own shakeups over the summer, and DeSantis has struggled as a candidate. I mean, some of this is just the campaign, and some of this is the apparatus around him, and some of it comes from the candidate, I think, including a culture around him. To Donna's point, we don't know what this will look like on caucus night. It's very hard to tell what somebody's organization actually is. That's true of the Trump team. That's true of the DeSantis team. It's true of the Haley team, although Haley, I think we have a little bit of a better sense that she's starting from behind on that front. But DeSantis has not done a ton of favors for himself with these endless process stories. It hurts with donors in a real way.
Julie, Ryan is clearly right that Donald Trump's people would be happy with the way this is scripting out. At this point, no one's ever had as big a lead as he has going into
Thank you,
Iowa,
George. Can't believe I'm thanking George Stephanopoulos.
And once momentum takes over, you don't know how the race is going to shake out.
There is that feeling where you just expect a surprise somewhere along the way, right? If you look at all of the presidential campaigns that all of us have been involved in, at some point there's some moment of surprise. It doesn't mean that the front runner may not eventually
win. There's a difference here.
I think the big question right now is all of these things that we're talking about, ground game organization, big endorsements, do those matter in a race where you have this cult of personality around Donald Trump? In some ways, they feel very kind of pre-2016 when you talk about the potential advantages that they could give a candidate. Certainly a DeSantis and a Haley hope that's not the case. But you do wonder how much that matters, you know, when you do have somebody at the front who's a former president and has so much support.
Ding, 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 ding. It took 3 minutes and 55 seconds of that entire roundtable to get to the actual point, which is that we don't have a comparable situation here. You have a lot of people rolling clips today. And by the way, oh my God, you have a lot of people rolling clips today about, well, nobody thought Huckabee was going to win. Nobody thought Santorum was going to win. They did. Indeed, they did. And those were close races in comparison. The only comparison that we have that's even remotely close is 99 to 2000 when George W. Bush ended up anyway winning the Iowa caucuses, which we have talked about ad nauseum on this show. Very big differences. George Bush was not a former president beloved by the party. He had a father who was, but George W. Bush did not have supermajority support, at least, saying they refused to change their minds. So for all of the talk we hear about committed caucus goers, Donald Trump's campaign has twice the number of committed caucus goers that Ron DeSantis has. Organization does not eliminate 30-point leads, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris. It is Monday, December 4th already. I hope you're well into your Christmas decorations because I am starting to. Got the peaks of the house this weekend. And because the neighborhood got smart and me and my neighbor got used a boom, I didn't kill myself like I did last year. Damn near killed myself. Falling off a ladder 30 feet in the air, rolling down, black and blue legs, up and down. It was great, let me tell you. So anyway, yeah, if you like these videos, don't forget to like them, share them far and wide. If you're on YouTube, of course, hit that notification bell when you subscribe, and that'll let you know when we're going to go live. But Rumble, you don't have to hit the notification bell. So just subscribe on Rumble, and that'll let you know. Getter, as always, thanks. We're really building up an audience on Getter. I told you we're not streaming on Twitter anymore. Today, that has been discontinued. Friday was the last day. So we're trying to make sure that, of course, the best place everybody knows to go is Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com, peoplespundit.locals.com. Stream directly there as well, which you can use now on if you have an Amazon Fire Stick or a whole lot of TVs with certain apps. You can go right to them and watch us right on the TV through Locals. All right. All of that, largely what we're going to talk about today. This week, we will get more in depth about ethnicity, but I had to stop and address this. And we are going to have Robert Cahaly on. I can tell you he's got a slew of polls. I spoke to him over the weekend. He's starting to feel a little bit better. God be praised. And Laura was sick too. A lot of people have the same symptoms and everything. It's that time of year. 'Tis the season for that kind of sickness. But anyway, he's got a slew of polls coming out. He just had a national poll come out. Which we're going to get into, and he's got Iowa coming out, New Hampshire coming out, South Carolina. I'll tell you what, Robert Cahaly is from South Carolina. He's done incredible work on polling in that state before. Everybody has, their ups and downs and their misses. But when it comes to South Carolina primaries, Robert has done a very good job. So I'll be interested to see what he has in South Carolina. He had Trump just below 50. And then a slew of, in his last one, and then a slew of other polls came out showing Trump did in fact surpass that 50 mark in South Carolina. Why does that matter? The delegate rules are very important in South Carolina. We have to start looking at these polls now in the context of delegate rules, which I've tried to get everyone to do. We have a map up. Locals, you have it. Everybody has it if you're on Locals, but we've shared it before. It is a nationwide map of the Republican nomination schedule, but also of delegate rules, how these states allocate delegates. Iowa is the only true, really proportional allocation state. All right. Once we move on to New Hampshire, there will be thresholds to meet, and there will be winner take all provisions outside of New Hampshire. Even things get markedly more difficult, as Reince Priebus was stating. Things get markedly more difficult for people who do not have broad-based support like Donald Trump. Even Nikki Haley, I don't care. This surging, this one's surging, that one's surging. Such a joke. If you do not do better with self-described conservatives, if you do not do better with self-described Republicans, if you do not do better with Republicans who identify as America First Republicans, if you do not do better with Republican primary voters who have less than a 4-year degree, I don't give a damn what the media headline is for the damn week, the month, the day, whatever. The math is not there. It's not there. End of story. So we're going to have to start talking about it like that. And we're going to have to push back on some polling misinformation. I was going to have Robert on and talk about that on Friday, dealing with attacks on another pollster, until lo and behold, he put out his own poll and the attacks began on him. Listen, for people like Robert and I who have been spending an entire career trying to keep this industry honest, accurate, and relevant, these attacks are really starting to piss me off. All right. And they make people, we all talk and we chuckle behind closed doors. But I think I find it less amusing than others because we have spent so much time trying to educate people on polling and educate people on how to consume polls, what you can glean from them, what you cannot glean from them, what is significant, what is not, what is misinformation, and what is not. And then this motley crew of, I'm sorry, I'm not attacking the candidate over it, but it is his surrogates. DeSantis-aligned surrogates attacking everyone and everything who they find to be a threat, or they don't find that doesn't agree with them, or lay down for them. And I told you that would be the culture, as Maggie Haberman was talking about, this culture of this campaign, because they had dealt with no pushback in Tallahassee. They had a legislature who rolled over for them. They had a media who was largely favorable to them. So they chose to react in a very different way than other campaigns to adversity. And one of them is polls. And instead of taking criticism and refocusing their energy, or taking criticism and what can I take, what can I learn from this? Instead of doing it, they have done something that we have. I don't use that word because it's too strong of a word, but I have really, really disliked certain liberals for years. It's like you're willing to destroy credibility of an entire industry, which is central to a self-governing society, based on lies, because you're down, because you're losing. And that's not okay. We're also going to talk about updates from the campaign trail as well, in the context of everything you just heard all of those people say. But today, we're going to talk a lot about polling misinformation and why some of this stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. We're still going to do the segment about certain people's claims that, we have what was the word? I don't have the notes from that one in front of me, but we have invalidated a slew of polls, Emerson and Rasmussen and all these people, because they got some numbers wrong here and there. We're still going to do that, and we're going to leave that for Robert, and we'll have Robert on to talk about his polls. But for right now, I don't want to bring on a pollster to talk about his own poll, even though he's totally entitled to defend himself, but talk about the claims of misinformation about his own poll. But before they did attack Robert, all right, one of them, and I like Dave, I do, but this can't stand, all right, went on Bill Maher, and he was laughed at hysterically by two, Bill Maher and James Carville. And James Carville, as many of you know, is, by the way, married to a conservative woman. They were both campaign strategists and consultants. They've been around a long time. So it was like the last couple like this in this industry's history before we really got just disgustingly partisan. All right, he's famous for, it's the economy stupid, Bill Clinton's campaign. The guy's been around a long time. So, you're just not going to get away with making comments like this in the presence of people like James Carville, because he's going to mock you endlessly. And that's what happened on Bill Maher. So before we take a look at the statement of just completely dominated by polling misinformation, we're going to run a clip real quick that led up to it, because I knew it was coming. This has been the MO of this campaign surrogate group for months. They get some kind of like media hit where they try to tee it up, and then they spend all social media trying to rehatch it. And they're trying to like set it up so then they can dismiss people later and attack people later, right? It's not effective at all. I don't know where they got this from. It sure as hell isn't from reading Cheryl Atkinson's book, The Smear, all right? But something they never understood about this strategy. When you try to come at people like Robert, or you try to come at people like me, we have something you don't have: public trust. People trust us. You don't have the power to smear the rest of us. You don't have the credibility to combat us on this level, because nobody trusts you to know what the hell you're talking about with this stuff. And then you go on Bill Maher and make an ass out of yourself like this.
Well, no, I'm looking at you because I assume if he's the nominee, you will vote for this. You're going to vote for the Republican.
I
right?
want Ron DeSantis to be president.
I know, but it's going to be Trump.
We don't know.
Well, 41. So he's going to make up 41 points?
41 points. I mean, I look at these polls. Like, the polls are from 700 people via text.
Okay, who's lying
over the course
now?
of 2 weeks.
Who's lying now? You think DeSantis is gonna beat Trump for the nomination? Or Nikki Haley?
I told you who I want to, and I don't know what's going to happen, but nobody knows what's going to happen. I think if he wins Iowa, then anything's possible.
So, Michael, George Santos is having a better year than Ron DeSantis. Okay? DeSantis is throwing spaghetti against the goddamn wall. He's coming on Bill Maher. He's trying to debate news.
Hey, wait a second. Am I the wall here?
No, but if a right-wing Republican that comes on here, he's desperate. You pointed it out when I saw the clip of him on the show. The fact that if you were ahead, you wouldn't be here. Yeah. Okay, I mean,
but he did exactly. No. He did exactly what we all want candidates to do, which is talk to the other side.
Right.
So I was here that day with you, and I think it was for him to be here and lay out his case is actually what we all want. Isn't it what you were just asking?
Taking advantage of desperate politicians is my business model.
All right, so you could see James Carville literally laughing in his lap, right? Literally just laughing in his lap. It was not a good look. One, candidates should go on left-wing. If you're a right-wing candidate, you should go on left-wing programs. I think that was refreshing that Trump did that in 15 and 16, something that other candidates did not do. If you're a left-wing politician, you should go on right-wing ones. Unfortunately, they don't anymore. They hide. Left-wing politicians go on left-wing news outlets, and that's it. And the problem with the argument Dave is making there with DeSantis is that he didn't do it until he was down. When he thought the polls were still real and all of his surrogates thought the polls were still real, they went on favorable outlets. They only sat with interviews with favorable people. They ignored everybody else and or attacked them. And now you want credit for doing something after the fact that it was already pointed out. It's like somebody saying, for instance, it's the same principle as you don't donate to charity. And then next month you donate to charity and then let everybody know that you donated to charity. Well, you don't get any accolades. You don't get any, credit for making a decision after the fact that it was already pointed out that you were doing something incorrect. All right. So then that teed up these claims from Dave. And again, I'm really shocked to see these kind of claims from Dave. I am. I'll be honest with you. He's an intelligent guy. And that's what I think bothers me so much, because if you're going to be a critic, at least educate yourself before you come out with things that are not true. And then worse, do damage. Again, because I'm coming from a place here of, I came on the scene bashing things like response rates, but in the context of other criticisms. And that is what is key. And really, again, should have done his research. But also, that the industry had inherent biases, and not only with their methodologies, but they had ethical problems. They had cognitive biases that they were falling prey to. They had their own social biases that they were falling prey to. And that is a greater conversation that we needed to have as an industry. When you do like this, you hurt the efforts of the rest of us to try to make the industry better, to earn the public trust back that the industry has lost because of a series of misses. However, we are not talking about misses on the level that they are trying to claim. So let's just look at this, because this is the first one that we're going to look at in a series of segments on polling misinformation that really it cannot stand. And again, other pollsters are kind of just laughing like, I know, Rich, this is stupid, blah, 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 blah. And then some others get it, that this is a real issue. Polling has a critical role in a self-governing society. And any criticisms of it must be serious and productive. Monday morning thought. As I mentioned to Bill Maher on Real Time on Friday, and by the way, there was this statement at the tail end of that video. Oh, I'm not, what do I take from a poll that has 700 responses and they reach people through text message? First of all, what is the population size? 700 could be a totally adequate sample size. Second of all, not every mode is the same. So with that in mind, these polls showing Trump is up by 50 are all ridiculously flawed. Okay. Check this. By Trafalgar, which is supposedly reputable. There's an attack on Robert. Supposedly reputable. Robert had misses in 2022, without a doubt. But before that, he was one of only two pollsters who polled nationally and at the state. Oh, no. One of only two pollsters who polled at the state level to accurately predict that Donald Trump would win the Electoral College. I am the other one. That's it. In 2020, even in the states where he had Trump up a little bit in some of these Rust Belt polls, it was within the sampling error more than the polls that showed Biden being up. Even though Biden ultimately won, Robert's poll, for instance, showing that Trump, I'm using this as an example. Trump is up by a point in Wisconsin. is more accurate than the New York Times saying that Biden is up by 11. My audience understands that, but the greater consumer audience, the voters, may not. 1,084 people responded over 4 days, but the response rate was only 1.4%. So basically, 99 out of every 100 people, and actually it's 98.6, out of every 100 people they called, ignored them. That's about 100,000 people who just hung up. Does that seem like a legit sample to you when virtually everyone they reach out to ignores them? Have you ever been called by a polling agency? After 3 years of COVID, do you actually trust experts and polls? What the hell does COVID have to do with experts? What does that have to do with polls? Has there ever been a time in American politics when we have been told we shouldn't have debates and candidates should drop out before the primaries? This is called obfuscation. This is mixing a whole bunch of irrelevant crap in an argument that is not a sound argument in the hopes that you just, think that they're related somehow. Oh yeah, that makes sense a little bit. And that also makes sense a little bit. And by the way, that also makes sense a little bit. They're not related at all. And none of them support the argument initially made, but that's not the point. So now the question, and should drop out before the primary. So now the question is, why does mainstream media keep pushing them? As if there's some grand discovery here. Again, response rates, there's a debate about them and has been for years. He probably should have also taken it should have taken some time to educate himself and do a little bit of research about when response rates began to fall, when they became less predictive of the accuracy of surveys. A little thing called sampling, the sample size matters when it comes to response rates. You reduce the likelihood of larger errors when you have lower response rates, when you increase your sample size. I'm going to look at a couple of studies here to show you what I'm talking about. Sample size once upon a time used to be one of the key indicators of whether that data was sound or whether it was not. All right. First, there is a study from 2015, and then there's a study from just a year and a half ago. And I'll be the first one to explain to you guys, I'm not a huge fan of APOR. I don't think they've done enough to keep the industry honest or accurate. But in any event, they took a look at this. One study that was published in Public Opinion Quarterly, which despite, and whatever, except the cookies, it's Oxford. Despite what APOR says, they are in fact really the magazine of APOR. They claim they're not, but they sponsor it. All right, so let's get real. They once gave me a hard time about a citation about Rasmussen, their accuracy, the track record of accuracy, because of the method that was detailed in Public Opinion Quarterly to gauge accuracy. All right. How off was a pollster on the overall result? And in 2016, they, instead of really caring about what happened in 2016 with the polling misses, they went into defend mode, and they went into a mode of basically trying to make their misses and others being more accurate like a fluke. All right. So they took issue with us using a method that they endorsed in Public Opinion Quarterly to gauge who was and was not accurate. And by the way, even 5 Turd Fake used it. Anyway, this is a study from Volume 79, Issue 1, Spring 2015. Response rates, non-response bias, and data quality. Results from a national survey of senior healthcare leaders. The abstract basically says this. Survey response rate is regarded as a key data quality indicator, yet response rate is not necessarily predictive or non-response bias. Our study objective was to use a high response rate survey to assess non-response bias across successive waves. This survey of healthcare leaders utilized a web-based self-report format with an initial invitation and 4 non-respondent follow-ups. In other words, they sent it out. If they did not respond, they sent out additional emails, or in this case, it had to be emails in 2015. But nowadays, it would be a follow-up text maybe. Don't forget to take the survey. Hey, take a couple of minutes to make sure you take the survey. One of the major problems with Dave's argument is response rates only covers in the way he's trying to use that argument. It only matters with certain modes. That's the only way it would even be relevant. And then the problem beyond that is going to be covered in the next study that we're going to go over in a second, which is years later, 8 years later, almost. Across 5 waves, comparisons were made for demographic and facility characteristics, proportion of items completed, and the distribution of 3 question types: factual reports of customized categorical responses, single item evaluations using 5-point Likert scales. My followers know what a Likert scale is. When we design surveys, I show you. And multi-item scales across 4 or 5-point Likert scales. The overall response rate was 95%, 118 out of 124. That is a very common response rate. And then some people you'll even see in some panels will call it like a completion rate. That is even though those are very confusing terms, but they do interchange sometimes. That's very common for online opt-ins, what they're doing right here. Waves did not differ by demographic and facility characteristics or missing data. Across waves, there was no significant differences between responses to 2 factual report questions or the single or multi-item scale measures of attitudes. According to a, quote, what-if analysis of cumulative results by wave, the same conclusions would have been reached if data collection had been halted at earlier points in time. Precision and statistical power increased as number of respondents accumulated by wave. Of course, a high response rate facilitated studying the impact of non-response bias by wave. Although high response rates are desirable because of precision and power, as survey fatigue increases, you guys know what that is as well, absolute thresholds representing adequate, quote, adequate, unquote, response rates may be less realistic. Results from, quote, low, unquote, response rate surveys should be considered on their merits, as they may accurately represent the attitudes of the population. Again, results from low response rate surveys should be considered on their merits, as they may accurately represent attitudes of the population. Therefore, low response rates should not be cited as reasons to dismiss results as uninformative. Let me do it again real slow. Therefore, low response rates should not be cited as reasons to dismiss results as uninformative. Not good enough? One study? You don't agree with it? Okay, let's move on. There's a follow-up to 2023. Response rates, an overview. And why is it, Laura said in the other room, explain why that is. We're going to in this follow-up. Because now we're starting to look at it. He's acting as if this is a new problem. Response rates are something that just got foisted up on us. It's only an issue now that Ron DeSantis is running for president. When he was running for governor, there was no problem with the response rates. In other elections before, there was no problem with response rates, only when now. And by the way, when he was doing better against Donald Trump in the polls 8 months ago, there was no problem with response rates. This is like somehow a new problem or something. We have known about the issues surrounding response rate decline since 2004 at least. We've known about it before then, but I'm talking about as an industry, it's become a widespread conversation since Murray made such a big deal about it in 2004 when John Kerry lost the presidency, and the exit poll suggested that it really was impossible for George Bush to be reelected. We knew about it before then, but it became a public discussion many years ago. 2 decades more. We can go through, this is APOR, not only going over whether or not, response rates are an issue, but how things have changed with survey collection and what we've done to combat low response rates. And then also their definition to pollsters about, or really it's a response rate calculator. Here is the equation we would like you to use to calculate response rates. And some of you are familiar with it, some of you aren't. I've decided that I really touch on this stuff during shows here and there. And for a long time, I've been meaning to do short little clip shows about what's the difference between a sampling error, what's the difference between a margin of error and a confidence interval. How do you calculate a survey sampling error? And do different modes change that equation? Having a mixed mode survey, can you use the same equation that you would, let's say, if it was just pure random digital dial and randomization? If you had an opt-in component in the survey. And then when you do give that overall, once you've figured out that those really are different, and you go to give the overall error rate for your survey, what term is the accurate term to use and why? Why do we always say sampling error? The overall sampling error, as opposed to the survey has a margin of error of plus or minus 3.5%. And I've been meaning to do that stuff for a while, years probably. And it's time probably we do it. A great one would be, how do you calculate your response rate? How does a pollster do that? And why is a low response rate an absolute ridiculous reason to dismiss the results of a poll? I'm going to read this more than I intended to because I think it really is important. It also deals, why is that? How are things changed? Until recently, there were almost as many ways to calculate response rates as there were researchers. Response rates, cooperation rates, and completion rates were often treated as interchangeable in the literature. I just told you that. And it's not, it's screwy to do that. But when you're talking about online panels, folks, you're not really talking about how many people traditionally you reach through phone or whatever, then decide to hang up on you, decide that they will participate in the survey, how many dropped off early. You're really talking about what is a completion rate. You know you're going to send out those invites once they get through the preliminary screens and they start the survey. What is a completion rate? They were treated as interchangeable. In the early 1980s, the Council of American Survey Research Organizations, or CASRO, made the first attempt to standardize the definition of a response rate, an effort completed in the late 90s by APOR with the publication of standard definitions, final dispositions of case codes, and outcome rates for surveys. And that's linked right there. The 9th edition of standard definitions clearly distinguishes between the response rate and the cooperation rate, covers household, telephone, mail, and internet modes of administration, discusses the criteria for ineligibility, and specifies methods for calculating refusal and non-contact rates. As a result, response and non-response rates can now be successfully compared across surveys of different topics and organizations. In other words, modes too. In addition, these definitions and their widespread acceptance have resulted in a greater willingness of researchers to report low response rates. See, years ago, when we really didn't know what to do with them, a lot of people would try to hide them. It's true, Laura. It's absolutely, they would. Because it didn't mean that their results should be dismissed offhand necessarily like that. They didn't want to have to get into that conversation. So they wouldn't report it. I'll tell you right now, most media outlets don't. The fact Robert Cahaley even did that, he should be given praise for. We had entire episodes about ways that things that we have done to increase our response rate from 1.4 to 2.3, 2.5. Iowa's a high response rate, is a higher response rate state, especially when you're rolling up on the caucuses. But we had that entire episode when we did the Iowa caucus poll back in the summer. Response rates and survey quality. However, two factors have now undermined the role of the response rate as the primary arbiter of survey quality. Again, please draw your attention to that statement. However, two factors have now undermined the role of the response rate as the primary arbiter of survey quality. This is why, much to Laura's chagrin, for a very long time, I have made the less than veiled reference to sample size and other things. And in polling, size matters. I'm doing that not to only be uncouth and a little bit crude. I want you to remember it. So when you say, damn, is Rich equating the sample size of a poll to a male genitalia? I want you to think about that so you do not forget what I'm trying to tell you. The point is not for me to be crude. The point is to really stress in your mind how important they are, because you mitigate what used to be believed as a inherent flaw with a poll that had a low sample rate, a low response rate. You mitigate it by having a larger sample, because the equation for sampling errors is the damn same. You have the target population size and then the survey size that was sampled. The larger the sample, the lower the response, the lower the sampling error. Largely due to increasing refusals. In other words, people, not doing it. Response rates across all modes of survey administration have declined, in some cases precipitously. As a result, organizations have had to put additional effort into administration, thus making all types of surveys more costly. I mean, this should all sound very familiar to people who have followed me for a very long time. Not even that long. At the same time, studies that have compared survey estimates to benchmark data from the US Census or very large governmental sample surveys have also questioned the positive association between response rates and quality. 20 years ago, maybe. You're still using 400 adults, 400 voters in a national survey? Maybe. You're still using a single mode that has its own artifacts and biases? Maybe. With low sample sizes? Maybe. Again, this is not a new problem. Furthermore, a growing emphasis on total survey error has caused methodologists to examine surveys, even those with acceptably high response rates, for evidence of non-response bias. Results that show the least bias have turned out in some cases to come from surveys with less than optimal response rates. Again, they're testing for non-response bias, and what they actually found was that results that show the least bias have turned out in some cases to come from surveys with less than optimal response rates. Experimental comparisons have also revealed few significant differences between estimates from surveys with low response rates and short field periods, and surveys with high response rates and long field periods. Again, all of this should make a lot of sense to you if you are a follower of mine for a while. What is something I don't like? And it's debatable. This is a debate within the industry, but what is a pet peeve I have? Locals, come on, you know it. Everybody wants their own question added to the public polling project. Everybody thinks that this should be asked and that should be asked, and they're great ideas. But in many times, in many cases, especially when we get closer to elections, what do? I trim the survey. I trim the fat off the survey because I don't want survey fatigue. I want a large sample size, the most representative sample I could get. They are arguing they've gotten good data if you've kind of interchanged it a little bit. They've had low response rates from short field periods. And they've had surveys with high response rates with long field periods. In other words, too, and another thing I can't stand with the longer field period, I cannot stand long field periods. You should not be in the field for 2 weeks. The difficulty of determining bias from comparing survey estimates to outside measurements, however, has led to ingenious strategies. One recent study developed an internal benchmark by using the 50-50 gender split of heterosexual married couples to gauge the accuracy of survey estimates by gender among the respondents in 6 different surveys. There is currently no consensus about the factors that produce the disjuncture between response rates and survey quality, but the evidence does suggest several rules of thumb for consumers of survey reports and for researchers. And before I move on real quick, I just want to say that was gender. What do we always tell you, especially when it comes to online? Gender, age, and region. Gender, age, and region. Gender, age, and region. And what are red flags, for us almost all the time? Education, something long they took a long time to catch on to. Geography. And of course, gender is huge. We don't wait for ideology like some other pollsters do, but if I know what the sample target population is for certain other demographics, and I can see some crazy result, it doesn't mean necessarily that my response rate is causing that problem. It could be geography. It's just such an incorrect statement, folks, on so many levels. It's not even funny. Robert Barnes and I have done how many episodes of What Are the Odds for years, many years, talking about response rates and how the best way to combat low response rates and response biases and different cognitive biases, larger sample sizes, and to make sure that sample size is representative. Robert Cahaley's sample size is an adequate sample size. Researchers should always include in their survey reports the response rate, computed according to the appropriate APOR formula or another similar formula fully described. And by the way, that's what the Transparency Project's all about. Spencer Kimball, who they also make fun of and attack on basically a routine basis every time he releases a poll. He actually does follow line by line the APOR Transparency Initiative checklist. We put all of the information that's supposed to be in their checklist. We just don't do it in their format. Like, here's a PDF, here's this, that, and the other thing. But he's one of few that does it. Fox News doesn't do it. CNN doesn't do it. That's true. And those are credible arguments to have with the polling industry. Fox, you're way out of the mainstream. How did you do X, Y, and Z? Where did you list A, B, and C? When you just come up with these asinine criticisms because you don't like the results of the poll, you damage the rest of our abilities to do this, to wage those complaints, to better the industry. They get to put us all in the same category and dismiss us because they painted us with the same brush. People who have concerns about voter fraud, you get put in the same tank as the rest of those, or you get painted with the same brush as the rest of those like snake oil salesmen, morons. Then you get nowhere. You all get dismissed. Furthermore, several other measures of quality should become part of reports, especially when the response rate is low. On their side, consumers of survey results should treat all response rates with skepticism, whether they're low. All response rates should be treated with skepticism, since these rates do not necessarily differentiate reliably between accurate and inaccurate data. Your Honor, I rest my case. I'm going to read that statement again. On their side, consumers of survey results should treat all response rates with skepticism, since these rates do not necessarily differentiate reliably between accurate and inaccurate data. Instead, consumers should pay attention to other indicators of quality that are included in reports and on websites, such as insignificant levels of bias, low levels of missing data, and conformity with other research findings. Let me go through them and give you examples. Should pay attention to other indicators of quality that are included in reports and on websites. First and foremost, immediately, there should be all of the basic standard disclosures that are expected of a pollster should be out there in their own way. If they don't follow things like the APOR checklist, I mean, APOR is, in my opinion, again, they've excluded too many people from the conversation. So as long as the information is there, that's great. How were these interviews conducted? Where, what modes were used? Different, of course, all weights should be like we do, all of the weights and participation part, all of that should be in there. I mean, everything that you see, the entire point of the public polling project is transparency. So people who follow us know what you should expect to see from other pollsters. And then on websites, how many times do I tell you guys that all polls are not created equal? And that the track record of a pollster really does matter. We literally put out social bias indicators. Do you see significant levels of bias or not? Does it appear that there's missing data, right? So did you only speak to females who were 18 to 24? And therefore, your 18 to 24 just looks super, super liberal, even for young voters. And do they conform with other research findings? The tranches. The tranches. Do they conform with other research findings? Right? Do they favor results for one candidate or another when the consensus does not? Are they wildly outside of that? And does this consistently happen? Because I tell you, I like being an outlier when I'm right. But do people consistently fall outside of the consensus and are wrong? Right? Is it the opposite? Right? And then, for instance, have you ever seen this consensus 50 point off the mark? Have you ever seen another comparable situation where the polls not only got the front runner wrong, but the front runner was the front runner in every single state and nationally, and then ended up losing by whatever, a few points here and there when the polls suggested he was like 30 to 50 points ahead? Is there another example of that ever happening? Ever? One of the biggest primary misses in the history of polling of presidential primaries was in 2016, the Michigan Democratic primary. Polls generally showed at the end of it that Bernie was down by like 20. All right, 20 and change. And Hillary Clinton was going to stomp him. Bernie ended up eking out a slight victory. That's a pretty big miss. It's, again, historic. There are not other examples that you could find that are like that. But the polling was scarce. There wasn't a whole lot of it. It was largely made up by two outlets. And if you really were paying attention, they did not give last-minute polling. What they did show was that over a short period, you could see Bernie making jumps of 10 points at a clip in the weeks and months leading up to that primary. It didn't come out of nowhere. Hillary Clinton was leading by nearly 35, 38 points. And then it fell to 30. And then it fell to 25. And then it fell to 22. And then they stopped polling and Bernie won. Again, that's one state. Bernie was not the national frontrunner. It wasn't ahead in every single state. It's hardly comparable. It is a one-off historic miss. Gary Hart is another example, but guess what? Gary Hart does not fall into that category because Gary Hart had a scandal. There was a reason for Gary Hart and his collapse. There is no evidence, none, that pollsters are going to be off by 50 points. Even in the Iowa caucuses, there is no evidence that pollsters will have a presidential candidate 45 days out, 30 to 35 points ahead to go on to lose the Iowa caucus. Polling misses can't do that, or have never done it anyway, not that much. An organization cannot cover that kind of ground. Organization could be good for, 5, 7 points. Yeah, I'll even give 10. It is not good for 30 points. Polling misses because of low response. A low response rate is not going to result in a 50-point miss, a 30-point miss. The problem in Michigan in 2016 wasn't response rates, and that was a 20-point miss. The problem was they stopped polling. They probably would have saw that momentum last minute had they kept polling. There's a lot more. I just went through one. Took me about an hour to go through it. Just dealing alone with the claim that low response rates mean all of these polls are ridiculous. And by the way, let this be a lesson to other pollsters and people out there. Robert was favorable to them. Robert showed a result that others are not showing. If we go to, for instance, if we go to the latest nomination polling, for instance, Trafalgar is way outside of that. Trafalgar is most definitely in what we would call the Trump bearish category. The tranche that is more bearish on Trump clearly shows Trump as the national front runner, but much, much more bearish. By the way, the IBD tip poll has Trump beating Biden by the exact margin that we have Trump beating Biden. With the general election, we added a little bit more, but we didn't add. When you add Stein and Kennedy and West all together, it does help Trump. When you add just Kennedy, it's a lot less of a picture. But as you can see here, the consensus, just to give it to you, is Trump nearly 50 points. Trump plus 47.8. Trafalgar is largely the one responsible for that decline. IBD tip is Trump plus 51. They have Trump at 61, DeSantis at 9, Haley now in second with 10. Trafalgar at least had Haley still behind DeSantis, and he still got smeared, with Trump only up by 37. And he still got attacked. News Nation, which is our buddies over at Decision Desk, they have Trump at 60. DeSantis and Haley basically tied 11 and 10% respectively. They got Trump up 50 points. The Messenger, Harris X, they have Trump up 59 with Trump at 68. Morning Consult's got Trump at 64, Trump plus 50. Emerson, 64, Trump plus 55. Harvard Harris, Trump plus 58. So you see, Robert is way more favorable to the non-Trump candidates. And he still got attacked as a supposedly, folks, a supposedly reputable pollster. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. Robert put his name and reputation on the line to tell people the truth that other people were, or trying to tell people the truth that other people refused to tell in 16 and 20, which is that these races for the presidency were going to be much closer than other media polls had suggested. We mock some of the, the Biden plus 17s in Wisconsin. But for the most part, if you go and look at the RCP average right now, you will see that the polls missed in Wisconsin by about 7 points, 8 points. Michigan, 6 points, 8 points, right? Back and forth. They did not miss by 30 and 50 points. State depending, national poll depending. Supposedly reliable. That's tragic. That's very, very tragic. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about, we'll give some updates from the campaign trail. And I mean, honestly, with the tactics being the way they are, is anybody at all surprised about the updates we're going to go over? All right. I've never seen a group of people or a candidate campaign go so scorched earth on people they ignore and dismiss what is legitimate and valid and could have been useful criticism. Instead, constructive criticism. Nikki, I hate to say this, Nikki Haley, man, she said it to Martha McCowan. I guess I'd be mad too if I spent $100 million to lose all my support. Nobody's done this before. Best thing pollsters can do to combat this misinformation is be right in 45 days, 40-something days. Just be right. It's the best thing you could do. And not even. All throughout the primaries. Do the best job you can. Because in the past, we've seen arguments really, and the pollsters themselves have done the most damage. That's the truth. That's still the truth. That is still the truest statement out there. But we have given credit to some of them when credit is due. Folks, you know this. We savaged Quinnipiac, for instance. Savaged them. They made adjustments. They retooled. In 22, they didn't do a terrible job. Now, presidential elections are different animals. So we'll see how they all do in 24. I'll see how I do in 24. But many people, and I know because of my relationships with different vendors, many people have tried to do better. It is not my job to only attack left-wing people who do a bad job or push misinformation or push BS. Most of the polling misinformation this cycle and stuff that is damaging to political discourse has come from the right. And I'd be a damn hypocrite if I didn't go after them as well. It's that simple. Let's tell you about a great deal from our friends at Jam and Bean. Keeps me up at nights. And we all need it. Butter rum. Look at that. Oh, it was so good. Their gourmet popcorn, whatever it may be. Oh God, look at that. That actually, Laura, I'll tell you what, after the show, I'm going to have me one of those that was just on the screen right there. Listen, if you're like me or where I like both, because sometimes I'm in a rush and I need a K-cup. I don't have time to sit there and do coffee, which is what I feel is the right way, right? Have freshly roasted beans grounded right there before you use them. The Jam and Beans got it all for you, whether you have the time or you don't to do that, right? And then, of course, their gourmet popcorn. I love it. Oh, I got to give a shout out to you guys. These Patriot owned. They were, I'll tell you, I say this all the time, and it bears repeating every time we talk about Jam and Bean. I always say this, which some people hate, but it's true. There were no heroes in the political class during COVID. The heroes of COVID and COVID tyranny, put the pushback against COVID tyranny, were average, everyday Americans, business owners, people who, stood up and said, no, this is not science. This is tyranny. And these guys took a huge hit for it, but they did the right thing. And they'll be, they're being rewarded because of them doing the right thing. Their innovation is just over the moon. Those K-Cups, I'll tell you right now, they're the only medium-bodied roast that is a real medium-bodied roast in a K-Cup, period. End of story. But they send all the time. They say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because I love their popcorn. You guys know how much I love their popcorn. But their new freeze-dried stuff is so good. When I had the honey thing, bit of honey one, I was like flipping out and telling you guys about it before Halloween. But now they're what is it, Laura? Please tell me what it is again, because I forgot. Can you pop in and say it? It's because this one was cookie dough flavored, saltwater taffy, right, Laura?
Yes, saltwater taffy cookie dough, freeze-dried.
Oh my God. It was a huge hit. We had friends over, and as you can hear, poor Laura's still sick. We had friends over, and they were just an enormous hit. So good. I'm not even that big of a fan of saltwater taffy. But that was so good. And I love the freeze-dried Skittles too, as well, the Starburst. It's all good. It's all delicious. These guys are just doing a bang-up job over there. And when you sign up for a new subscription, I'm going on and on, but I really love it that much. When you sign up for a new subscription, there's the promo code. Laura has it right there, TPP40. Use that at checkout. That'll get you 40% off your initial subscription cost. And then every month from using that code, when it re-ups, you're still going to get 10% off. All right. So again, Jammin' Bean, JAMNBean.com, promo code TPP40 at checkout. Amazing guys, super talented. Coffee roasting is an art form. It absolutely is. It's an art form. And those guys are, without a doubt, artists. They have just done a marvelous job at it. All right. So I'm going to play another clip, and that's going to lead us into this next story that we're going to do. And it's just, reality. By the way, in the clip I played before with ABC Meet the Press, did you take heed of what you heard from Maggie Haberman about the super PAC running Ron DeSantis' campaign? And that how none of us have ever really seen a situation like that before. I told you they were walking right up to the line that is of what is legal and what is not. And I'm telling you, if you didn't hear what I heard out of her mouth, what I really heard out of her mouth, you better open your ears a little bit wider. They're looking into that. And that is going to come back to bite them. I'm telling you it's going to. People are not going to allow a new era of super PACs just completely running a presidential campaign. They're not going to allow that, especially on the right. And I'm telling you, we have not heard the end of this. This could turn into a major problem. I would not be surprised if a year from now we're discussing, charges and FEC complaints. I'm talking about actual charges though from the Justice Department. And she tipped her hand, Laura. She tipped her hand when she said that. And that tells me there's an MYT task force somewhere researching that. And they will no doubt feed that to the feds. And that's how this stuff gets started. It's how it gets started. All right, let's roll this other clip from another panel on Sunday. And then we're going to talk about one of the stories that they actually cite. Okay. And I know some of it, grin and bear it with me. I know.
Steve, let's start with what we just heard from Governor DeSantis. He was defiant. He says he is in this race, in it at least through Iowa, to win it. And of course, we saw him hold that debate this week with Governor Gavin Newsom of California, trying to basically shake up the race. Is it too late for him to shake up this race?
I mean, I'm not sure it's too late for anybody to shake up this race. We've got 5+ weeks until Iowa. A lot can happen. But the facts are troubling for Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump, as you pointed out, is ahead by, depending on the poll, 30 points in Iowa, some 50 points nationally. And what struck me about your interview with him is how small he felt in response to those questions. You're losing to Donald Trump by double digits, by a huge margin. You've got a short amount of time to make your case. You gave him multiple openings to make his case against Donald Trump, and he just really didn't seem to take it. There were prods on Obamacare and claimed that Trump is running for himself and not for the folks. But on the big things, he didn't jump in and prosecute the kind of case against the person he needs to topple in order to win.
Tim, what was your take? And is
Those are valid
Iowa
points,
do or
by the
die
way.
for him? He says, hey, I'm going to
They
win.
are.
But does he need to at least come in second or else have a hard discussion about
He's done if he
potentially
doesn't.
dropping out?
He's done if he
Well,
doesn't
it's hard
win,
to see
period.
how, for Ron DeSantis, anything
Period.
short of winning Iowa
He's done.
catapults him into real contention in this race. Because let's just deal in reality here. Donald Trump's going to win New Hampshire. He's probably going to win New Hampshire running away, the same way that
South
he did
Carolina,
in 2016
Nevada.
against the crowded
Period.
field.
Period.
Ron DeSantis is approaching, I think, sort of a fork in the road and maybe he's already at the fork in the road, Kristen. He seemed defensive, jumpy in that interview. He almost gives the vibe of a guy who sort of knows that the end could be near. And let's keep in mind, Ron DeSantis is a young man. He's a talented politician. This is someone who a lot of Republican donors, a lot of Republican voters would like to see be president one day, perhaps not now. So are you served in your political future by losing Iowa, getting demolished in New Hampshire, and then losing in South Carolina, perhaps finishing third in South Carolina? The bloom would come off the rose perhaps permanently at that point. DeSantis has a very interesting decision to make here. And of course, we need to consider that in the context of his campaign apparatus and his super PAC outside apparatus sort of at war with one another and sort of imploding in real time. This is not a great moment for Ron DeSantis to be on a downward trajectory. And that's where he appears to be.
Such a great point about the fact that he is simultaneously keeping his eye on the future, which underscores likely why he decided to do that debate with Governor Gavin Newsom. Talking of the GOP frontrunner, we did hear from him yesterday in Iowa, former President Trump, keeping his sights squarely set on President Biden. Take a look.
Joe Biden is not the defender of American democracy. Joe Biden is the destroyer of American democracy. The fact is, Americans don't like fascists. We don't like communists. We don't like tyrants. We don't like corrupt politicians like Joe Biden.
Kimberly, what do you?
All right. Again, just a moment before we move on from this, Laura, I just want to say it's smart for Donald Trump to use the word fascists. The term socialists and communists has really been overused in American politics. Younger people are not afraid of communism, especially younger people, and older people who are, you already have voting for you. So for the longest time, Republicans using, commies, Marxists, socialists, really never really landed a blow. But Democrats using fascists against Republicans did land a blow because fascism is such a dirty word in American politics. And where I'm going with this is very simple. We've talked about this a lot. Fascism is not a right-wing ideology. It was painted as right-wing because of our history needing Uncle Joe Stalin to defeat the fascists in World War II. So we very much used, and all of us did, the whole Western world, put fascism on the right because the left-wing governments that we used to defeat them could not be seen in the same spectrum ideologically with them. Fascism, as is communism, are both forms of socialism. They are the government directing resources, labor, in the private sector. The difference is in communism, there's public ownership of industries. Under fascism, it's different. The government has, there's private sector figureheads, but the government still runs the show and the government tells them how to allocate resources, what to do with them. They don't really have a say. Even though it's made to look like there are people who are publicly owning these industries. In fascist Germany, a lot of people who were manufacturers were directed on, by the Hitler's regime, by the Third Reich, to change what they would manufacture. There's a very interesting story. I'm not going to get into it, but a very interesting story of one who was a traitor to Hitler and was executed over it. But that's fascism. And it is on the left. It's not a right-wing ideology. So for Trump to begin this dichotomy shift that Americans start to associate fascism with leftism is the smartest thing that anyone on the right could do in the mid to long term, and even in the short term, but there's other things to do. It's just that right now they are demonstrating themselves to be fascists. I mean, the use of the FBI as their own little SS, right? Now would be the time to begin to try and brand them as a left-wing ideology, which they truly are, right? I mean, we all know what Nazi translates to. Fascism is not a right-wing ideology because Truman and before him Roosevelt needed Uncle Joe to be liked by the American public, because Winston Churchill needed Uncle Joe to be liked by the English people. That's one of the great injustices, or really disservices, that was done to the Western people. And because of it, unfortunately, we are where we are. Meanwhile, Mao killed a lot more people than Hitler. I mean, a lot more. Stalin, by the way, I mean, could be argued, did. It's just that the particular brand of fascism by the Nazis was so morally repugnant because it targeted a group of people, a certain faith made into an ethnicity, and interchangeably, and it's just the horrors of what the final solution entailed. It stands out on its own, even though, again, Mao killed a lot more people. It's just who is it and why did he do it? So yeah, the best thing that Republicans could do is start to say, that there's nothing limited government about fascism. Nothing. There's nothing small government about fascism. It is another breed of the Democratic Party's insanity, and that's what it really is. And that's what you should do. Anyway, mentioned in that, of course, from the Atlantic, guy who works from the Atlantic, was this story. And then, of course, Maggie Haberman brought it up as well. We had talked about this when the campaign first started doing this, DeSantis's campaign. And I believe I was on with Steve Bannon. Steve had texted me saying that basically everybody took my Scott Walker comparison, because what I saw really was something very similar to Scott Walker. The difference is Scott Walker did not have a super PAC with that much money that Never Back Down had, number one. And number two, nobody around Scott Walker was willing to do with that super PAC what the people from Never Back Down were willing to do. And by that, I mean potentially violate the law to keep the campaign going. And I say potentially because I'm being nice. I'm not an investigator. I'm just telling you, as an election observer, you can't do what Never Back Down is doing. You can't. And I think somebody's going to have problems for this, legal problems. But in any event, I had said when it first started to happen, the shakeups, you have one shakeup, it's very, very common for campaigns to have shakeups and retools and relaunches, and right. They were doing it every 4 to 6 weeks for a certain period there. And now we're back to, the every 6 to 8 week, shakeup. And that is not normal. It is not a good sign, and it is not normal when you are right. I think Chris Hayes is right. You're like 5 weeks out from the Iowa caucuses. Pro DeSantis super PAC fires top officials as the tumult continues. This is a headline from the 3rd of December, yesterday. 3 days prior, on the 1st of December, there was this very same headline. And then, of course, on Friday, during our show on Friday, Adam Laxalt bailed. Never Back Down fired Kristen Davison on Friday, according to two people familiar with the decision. Well, who is she and when did she start to work for Never Back Down? Listen to this. Weeks of tumult as the chief super PAC supporting Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis continued into the weekend as it fired several top officials, including its new interim chief executive officer. The group, Never Back Down, fired Kristen Davison on Friday for unspecified, quote, management and personnel issues. Really? That kind of damages the argument against Donald Trump that personnel is policy and Trump made terrible personnel decisions. So when Chris Hayes says, he's got to go and make his case, folks, he's had months to make his case. What's going to change now? What is another relaunch going to do, Laura? Right. I know I know you're joking, but that's what I'm saying. What is it going to do? Is it going to suddenly make people convinced that you were the hero of COVID? Because they're not convinced and they don't care anyway. Is it going to suddenly make people think that you're going to have better personnel decisions than Donald Trump did? Or is it more logical to believe that you're a first-time newbie and you're going to run into the same problems Donald Trump ran into? At least Donald Trump had those problems and lived and learned already. I mean, there are New York Times articles about how Donald Trump has learned his lesson and is planning on has an entire infrastructure and apparatus behind making sure personnel does drive his policy. There's no such thing with Ron DeSantis. There's just a new shakeup now every 2 damn days. Just 9 days after she replaced Chris Jankowski as the CEO. Erin Perrine was a never back down spokesperson after Steve Cortez left. And Matthew Palmisano, another top official, were also fired. And Erin, by the way, she should sound familiar to you. She had been around from the beginning. On multiple occasions, Erin is someone that we made multiple statements to when these bad cycles of negative press were plaguing the DeSantis campaign. I said to the effect, you just keep repeating the same thing that people are criticizing you for. So Ron DeSantis is an underdog and he repeatedly overperforms. They wrote him off in 2018 and they wrote him off for his seat for Congress and this and that. And the answer everybody was saying was he was an underdog in the primary in 2018 and he was an underdog for the general election and he needed Donald Trump to get him elected for both. So if you're now running against the guy you needed to be elected in the first place, how do you think that is going to work? And instead, anyone who whether they were doing it to be helpful and to give constructive criticism or objective analysis, or whether they thought it was just a media attack, they treated everyone the same way and they would just smear, they would just attack, and then they would just repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Erin did it all the time. Now look at where she is. An internal email sent Saturday night said the super PAC had named longtime DeSantis ally Scott Wagner as interim CEO. Wagner also replaced former Nevada Attorney General Adam Laxalt as the board chair. So Wagner is doing the work of both of them. Or not the work in, I mean, that's probably a presumptuous statement, but supposedly serving in both capacities. That's a trimming down that should tell you something immediately. Money is a problem. The shakeups began as tensions boiled over in recent weeks. Jankowski left on November 22nd. Laxalt resigned 4 days later. Davidson's firing came 5 days after that. Yeah, forgetting, by the way, that she wasn't even the initial spokesman or the head of communications for Never Back Down. She began to do both of those roles. Steve Cortez was. Do I have reason? Am I hearing what I'm hearing in the other room? Do I have reason to celebrate? I think our son just hit a milestone. Anyway, I'll celebrate after. It was not immediately clear whether others had also split with the super PAC. Davison, Perrin, and Palmisano did not respond to requests for comment. Representatives for Never Back Down referred Politico to Wagner's Saturday night email. Perrin's dismissal was first reported by Semaphore and Palmisano's by the Associated Press. The continued disruptions come amid widespread infighting inside the super PAC and ongoing conflict with the Florida governor's campaign. Last week, NBC News reported on a near physical altercation between Wagner and Jeff Rowe. I watched a coping session by DeSantis supporters, led by one who is, we've talked about numerous times. I'm not even going to bring him up again. And the four of them really was like three who were still spitting BS and one that was coming to the realization that they should have listened to people and they're going to lose. Like, I'm not going to sit here on this podcast or on this show, and pretend anymore. And the three of them were real hard on him. He's not supporting DeSantis anymore. What he is saying is, we're going to lose. It's over. And that these people should never get a job in politics again. And I'm listening to this cope session, and I'm thinking to myself, why on earth did you ever think Jeff Rowe was going to lead you to victory? Why did you think Bob Vander Plaats was ever going to put you over the top? This group of people who were never Trump in 15 and 16, including the host of that COPE session, by the way. And yeah, I will refuse to make enemies of the decent folks at MSNBC by supporting Donald Trump. That's who that was. All of these people kill campaigns and have long killed campaigns. The Iowa Hail Mary strategy, and one of them even mentioned that it's often said that the Iowans pick corn, they don't pick presidents. And I don't like that. But it is a recognition of a reality that in the modern era, the Iowa caucuses can hurt you more than they can help you. And when you have a candidate like Donald Trump, or even back then, Scott Walker, if it wasn't for Donald Trump coming to the scene, they would have tried to kill Scott Walker's campaign anyway, and the Republican voters would have been left with nobody real. All right. So George Will's wife and all of these other schmucks that are, being regurgitated, that are playing musical chairs that you're hearing now, they all destroyed Scott Walker's campaign, and Scott Walker allowed them to destroy his campaign. Everybody knows Jeff Rowe and Casey DeSantis don't get along. He did, didn't he? That's what I'm saying. We have time to say he did it, right? Hold on, guys. I got to give my son a high five. Can you tell him to come in? Hey, Daddy's so proud of you, Roro. You just did that all by yourself? Big boy, dude. Big boys do that. So you had a big boy breakfast, and then you did the big boy deed all by yourself. Daddy is so, give me a kiss. I'm so proud of you. Come here. Oh, Daddy, you make me feel so special with those kisses. Good job. I'll see you after the show. Good job. Somebody's getting an extra bag of Skittles. Schnittles. Somebody's getting some. No, it's the thing's up. Somebody's getting some schnittles, dude. So proud. Anyway, so my, I'm bringing this up because I just don't. They're like, I want him punished now. Like a candidate, folks, is a grown ass man. You decided, against apparently even your wife's own wishes, to put this guy at the helm. I'm telling you, I even think that he exposed you to legal problems. You cannot have the donors for the PAC and the campaign in the same event, hanging out and hearing copium strategy from both the campaign apparatus advisors for the campaign and from Jeff Rowe, who is running the super PAC. By the way, you remember Jeff Rowe's meltdown in Pennsylvania on Fox News? John Fredericks was like, you listening to this dude? This guy's like, you're an amateur. He doesn't know the math. Dave McCormick's going to win the primary. I didn't give a damn if Oz or Dave McCormick won the primary. I'm telling people the math. It's not there. Dave lost the election day vote in his own backyard in Allegheny. The math wasn't there. The guy had a total meltdown on Fox News. Fox and Friends, I think it was. So my question is like, why do you not hold the candidate responsible? Because I hate to say it, but Maggie and what's her name from USA Today or the Associated Press, both of them are right. You can only blame the advisors so much. You have to recognize that the candidate themselves is they're the boss. Now, there's nothing much you could do about Jeff Rowe if you're abiding by the law and you're Ron DeSantis. There's not a whole lot you can do about Jeff Rowe. But from what we know and what we've heard and what's been reported, they are not abiding by the law of non-coordination. So it does appear to me that they could have bullied Jeff Rowe out at any time, and yet they didn't. I mean, I can't help but to flash back to the ridiculous presentations that he put on in the launch of the campaign and everything. And, that night, even and into the next day, I'm getting calls from people who heard it saying, listen, this is what they told us about the polling. Is this true? I can't help but to go back and remember. It's like, at what point did you really realize? Did you come to the realization that this was a problem? Because now we're 5 weeks before the Iowa caucus. At what point? The DeSantis campaign believes Never Back Down's TV ads have been ineffective, those close to the governor say, and the campaign manager, James Altemeyer, this week issued a memo implicitly suggesting the group instead focus on waging a get out the vote program. Again, here you go, walking up to the line. James runs the campaign. James cannot put out a memo instructing Never Back Down to do something like that. They're going to claim, well, it's not just a suggestion. That's my own opinion. And everyone knows what it really is. And the federal investigators are going to know what it really is. I'm telling you, I will be stunned if this doesn't happen. In the beginning, they said they were going to spend $100 million on Get Out the Vote. I can tell you with 100% certainty that the Iowa caucus poll that we just released last week is reflective of a backfire because of Never Back Down's ads, attacking Trump and attacking Haley. We know it. Never Back Down is so branded to Ron DeSantis that every time somebody does something from Never Back Down that the voter doesn't like, it hurts Ron DeSantis. That's why they tried to give $1 million seed money to another PAC, transfer that money over to another PAC that people in Iowa won't really, or they think anyway, they won't associate with Ron DeSantis because Never Back Down hurt them that bad. They know that I'm telling the truth about that, and others are telling the truth about it. Those ads completely misfired. Backfired. They would have hoped they would have misfired. They didn't. A turmoil roiled Never Back Down. DeSantis allies formed the new super PAC, Fight Right. Never Back Down had been the only pro-DeSantis group, taking on more campaign functions than most super PACs normally do. And the creation of the new group raised questions about Never Back Down's role moving forward. Here, listen, I have to state this role. A super PAC cannot host and hold events for a candidate the way that a campaign apparatus can, a campaign committee can. It's not legal. They need to make up other events because a certain percentage has to have other headliners. So if you have, and I'm just making it easy, and I believe, what is the rules? 75%? I have to look it up. But let's say you have 100 events, 75 were headlined by a certain candidate that PAC is supporting. You need another 25 events that are headlined by somebody else. They're trying to be nice here, Politico, but I'm telling you, this is a big deal. So if they're getting cut out now and they're on the demise, they better make sure they hit that number, because from what I heard, their paperwork is so screwed up. Their compliance, what they know about being in compliance is so messed up. They better make sure before they totally are bankrupted that they have enough events that are headlined by other people that the feds don't come in and charge them for violating that law. All right. And a lot of times this could just be a fine or something like that. But from what I understand, there's also issues with invoicing and exaggerated expense reports. It's bad. I mean, guys, understand, they didn't know they had a financial problem until the day before the filing deadline. So that tells you how mismanaged this has been. They had a whole lot of money and they were not good stewards of it. Let me put it that way. So where are we at? DeSantis continues to trail far behind former President Donald Trump in the race for the GOP nomination, and polls show the governor, once considered a possible strong competitor to Trump, instead locked in a battle for second with former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. The Koch brothers just released a poll. It's Americans for Prosperity. They're another PAC. they have endorsed Nikki Haley. It's the first time they've ever endorsed a candidate. That poll is for donors, so beware, okay? They have Haley 1 point ahead of DeSantis. We just polled Iowa. You can do that real easy, folks, with a little waiting trick, all right? DeSantis is second place among self-identified conservatives. He is second place among self-identified Republicans. He is second place among self-identified evangelicals. He is second place among those who don't have a college degree. It's a very, very, very distant second. But Nikki Haley's support when we got out of the field was mostly independent, moderate, and educated. In fact, I could even be more specific. DeSantis was doing just as well with 4-year degrees, even though Trump was beating them both. He was leading both. But Nikki Haley's real support was really only with advanced degrees. You are not going to be able, unless DeSantis collapses completely, and then his voters disproportionately go to Trump, which is what it does look like will happen. All right. And has happened. That's the only way she's getting second. So if what remains of, you know what, let me pull up the poll and to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. Hold on. Let me pull up this poll. I want to, again, as much as I criticize people in the first segment who are aligned with DeSantis because they're liars or they're ignorant, I don't know what they're doing, but they're pushing misinformation that cannot be allowed to stand. I can't allow the Koch brothers to do it either. The Koch brothers and Americans for Prosperity, they're the ads that I showed you a while ago and have brought up numerous times that basically say, don't nominate Donald Trump because he drives turnout higher. We can win if we nominate someone else because turnout will be down. It's the most pathetic thing I've ever heard and seen in my life. Democrats are going to vote, rest assured of that. And to pretend like you can nominate Nikki Haley and she's going to win by 11 points like these polls show because, they're just not going to come up and show up for Biden as long as Trump is not the nominee, you're sadly mistaken. You are sadly, sadly mistaken. All right, so here is the Iowa caucuses. Let's pull this up. And let's go to full screen so I can show you the demographics of what I'm talking about. Because I want you to understand that poll that was conducted by Americans for Prosperity, that poll is for donors. Now, they may be really, really tight, folks. But you can even see here in core candidate support, which we measure as a percentage of it is the percentage that says they're immovable as a share of their overall vote. And you can see that, of course, Trump has much, much more core support than anybody. DeSantis is only at 5%, but Haley's only at 3%. Trump is way ahead in core support. But here is the demographics. As you can see, here's Ron DeSantis, here's Nikki Haley. They're very close. He is trying to fend her off for second. But I don't know how she would beat him for second place if she doesn't do better with some of these other groups. DeSantis is even beating her among those who have a 4-year degree. She is doing well with those who have an advanced degree. I think she probably will wind up beating him with those. Right now, no. But it's possible she does. But here we have some college and associate. He's about tied with her. It's a big chunk of the electorate. Trump, again, is way ahead. But high school or less will be a huge chunk of the electorate. And DeSantis is like 3 times the support that Nikki Haley has. If Nikki Haley does not break into this group more, she won't break into this group more, is what I'm trying to say. All right. And then also, her urban vote share is not high enough to be mixed with the suburban vote share to get thumped that badly in rural caucus areas. All right. So I don't have Republican up here, but of course, Trump is taking most of the Republican vote, self-described. It is a closed caucus technically, but when we go and we see these entrance polls, when the Iowa caucuses kick off, you will see that, about 80% will call themselves Republicans. Another probably 18, ballpark, 19% will call themselves independents, and another maybe 1 or 2% will actually say, I'm a Democrat, but I'm registered to vote as a Republican and I'm caucusing today. So that happens. That's why we always look at vote registration, and we talk to you about that. And when it comes to the screen in closed caucus states, closed primary states, they have to be registered and eligible to participate in these primaries and caucuses but they may not tell you they're that party when you ask them what they are. All right. That's why it's confusing. We always get that from a reporter. Did you include independents in this? This is a closed primary. Right. No, Sherlock. And by the way, they have or had a lot of time to change their registration so that they would still qualify for the caucus. Even though Kim Reynolds wanted to, for obvious reasons, I think, Kim Reynolds wanted to limit that time. All right. So Trump leads in every region across all those. But my point is, I think that it's more likely that Haley fizzled like she did in our polling a little bit. Now, she clearly increased her support. I just don't, she doesn't have organization. Trump and DeSantis have organization. And she doesn't have core-based support with the biggest demographics that will make up the Iowa caucuses. So as much as she may appear to be surging in their poll, I don't buy it, folks. I think that you're going to have, at this, if the caucus was held today, I think you're going to see Trump come in a little bit over 50. I think DeSantis is going to edge out Haley more than the polls would suggest because of that organization, but not much, maybe like 2 to 5. Organization, again, is not going to clip you 30 points, folks. You're down 30 points, you're going to lose. There is no example. None. Ted Cruz had organization when Trump didn't in 2016. And they still needed that scam they pulled on Ben Carson with the help of Bob Vanderplaats, by the way. Mr. Religion himself. And that was only good for a few points. He dropped, Laura. He dropped. Oh my God. How could I have forgotten to tell people too? Doug Burgum suspended his campaign. So, for people who may say, who cares? Every bit matters. The consolidation argument that people were making before, as people drop out, they were looking at polls that had Trump at like 40 in Iowa and saying 60% of caucus goers don't want him. That is not how you read statistics, folks, because 40%, when Trump was doing worse, because 40% chose Donald Trump as their first choice, it does not equal 60%. It's not the same thing as 60% saying they don't want to vote for Donald Trump. I tried to explain that in the very beginning to a whole lot of people, to Mark Deasons. I'm not even going to mention her name. She's a horrible, miserable woman who works for one of those candidates. It's a horrible, miserable little foreign agent. And I tried nicely explaining, don't listen to that because it's not really true. Pollster telling you that is wrong. So it doesn't mean a majority. So if Trump gets 43% in a national poll, it does not mean a majority wants to move on from Donald Trump. And if you believe that, and if you take that, that insinuation that pollster was making, if you take that as sound advice, you're going to be thoroughly embarrassed. And I, honest to God, told her that trying to be helpful. I really did. I thought to myself, she clearly doesn't really know what she's talking about. She's a newbie. I mean, for the most part, she's a newbie to this scene. Apparently not in the politics of other countries, but in this scene she is. And I was really just trying to be helpful. And that led into one of their very quick smear spins, And I'm like, holy crap. Stupid. And here, Ryan on Locals. Quick question, Rich. Do you think it is a wise decision for DeSantis to call everyone who isn't for Ron a cultist and idolatry worshiper? Is that a winning message? That's a failure. Absolutely a failure. And here's the kicker. They keep saying, what is Trump going to do to consolidate? They don't understand that they have burned every bridge. And first of all, Trump has the least trouble consolidating his base than anyone else. That's number one. But number two, what they don't understand is that they are statistically insignificant. They are literally very, very loud on Twitter, but they mean nothing, almost nothing in the grand scheme of things. There are far more Biden voters who say, I will vote for Trump this time, than there are DeSantis supporters who say, I will never vote for Donald Trump. I mean, folks, we're now getting to 15% of 9%. Okay. So when we're talking about, remember the Trump or bust vote and how we would measure that, would you vote inevitably for the nominee? And by the way, for December, our national poll with the Christmas poll, we're going to talk about this week. We're going to be discussing that as well. We're going to do it again. And we're going to show you one more time where we're at now, because when DeSantis was at like 25%, having 20% of his supporters say, I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump, was a big deal, right? Because, I mean, or at least worth listening to, right, Ryan? Because now you're talking about 10% is 2.5%, 20% is 5% of the total Republican primary electorate saying, maybe I won't vote for Trump. Now you're like, ugh, because once you add that to other candidates, you could get maybe a base fracture and Biden winning about 10% of the Republican vote, crossover vote overall. And that's a problem. But as time has gone on, that fizzled. And the only thing that remained was a huge chunk of Trump's vote saying what I just saw David and others say in the comment before, that I wouldn't vote for that guy as dog catcher anymore. At this point, I'm voting for Trump or I won't vote at all. That is the only huge, statistically significant group that remains. In the last national poll that we did, he was at like 11 or 12%, right? And then only like 14 point something said, I wouldn't vote for Trump. Now we're getting into some really tiny numbers. That's a point, folks. That's like 1.5 points. That's it. That's in a survey that has a sampling error of 2.1%. It's literally statistically insignificant. Okay. And I know who you're talking about, Cecilia, and I don't want to give this guy any, he's mad as hell again. He's mad because his state doesn't want to vote for the guy that he and all the other religious moralists, or so-called, I mean, here's the thing. I myself consider myself to be a Protestant, a Christian. I was raised Roman Catholic. I was baptized in the Eastern Orthodox Church, but I was raised Roman Catholic because I'm Italian. And I'm not Catholic anymore. I've converted. I don't call myself evangelical because I don't evangelize. I know I should, but I'm not very good at it. I'm not a great Christian. I try to remember love, forgiveness, redemption, all the things that, drew me back to God. But I don't call myself an evangelical because I don't feel like I deserve that title. Nobody has done more to hurt that wing of American Christianity than themselves and their leaders. Actually, their leaders, because the people are great. Laura and I have gone to evangelical churches all over. These are wonderful people, salted, including, by the way, in Midwestern states, salt of the earth. And they are led by a bunch of hypocrites. This is not debatable. Gallup, Pew Research, us, and I'm sure many others, but I'm very familiar with the Gallup and Pew Research data about this. Anybody know who Jimmy Swaggart is, for instance? I think we talked about this a little bit on Friday, didn't we, Laura? Right? So it hurt the Catholic Church when the priest scandal came out, the sexual abuse scandal. It hurt the evangelical movement when Jimmy Swaggart got caught with his you-know-what in the cookie jar, or multiple cookie jars, apparently, taking multiple forms. All right. It hurt the evangelical church when the number one mega church female pastor got caught sleeping with one of the top leaders in the congregation and then faked her own kidnapping to try to cover it up. This hurts. And it makes the evangelical church, the Christian, Protestant evangelical church in this country has been plagued by one scandal over the other. What the group of Iowa religious leaders that are supporting Trump, their criticisms are real and people should listen to them, because when you put yourself above others, you better meet that standard that impossible standard that you have placed on others in order for you to consider them a good person, you sure as hell better make sure you meet them yourselves. Because when you don't, you just look like greedy little hypocrites. George Bush led the judgmental Christian era of this country. And then he hung it around their neck by putting amendments and initiatives all over state ballots to help them get reelected. Americans hate hypocrisy. Laura is 100% correct. I don't know if people saw what Americans would rather you say, listen, I'm flawed. I'm not always, I'm going to let you down once in a while. I'm not perfect. And by the way, nobody should understand that more than Christians, supposedly. Right. But I'll still stand up for you, and I won't let you, I won't betray you on those certain things. Like, I'm still going to look out for your own best interest. But as far as myself goes, you know, I'm not perfect, and I'm probably going to let you down here and there. Like if Jimmy Swaggart was just like, listen, I like ladies. I like women a lot. They probably would have been like, you know what? He's a man. At least he admitted it. How do you think Donald Trump got away with the Billy Bush tape? He didn't run. He sat down in front of that camera and he went, I never told you I was a saint. I just told you that I would stand up for you and be your voice. That's it. I never ran like another politician pretending to be morally superior. I am who I am, and I think you all know that. Telling you. Women heard that even and were like, that, you know what? That's fair to me. He's better than Hillary Clinton. Pulling that lever. Next thing you know, he's elected the 45th president. That's just, people like it when you're just up front. Bill Clinton's mea culpa. It's come to Jesus. Sister Soldier moment. People, you know, they just rather you not be full of crap. And this, Cecilia, they're killing themselves with that kind of talk. They're going to lose more than just their credibility. They're going to lose more than just this election. They're going to be out of this business if they keep this up. Because I'm telling you, the line was not crossed like this in 15 and 16. Like, they were all screwers, you know, but they didn't cross into this same line of personal attacks and vitriol. You know, I think there's a very conscious understanding this time by MAGA that they don't really need them, that they don't represent the voters who are not voting for Donald Trump right now. And if I was on their team, I would be very concerned that this time they don't extend their hand back out to you, because they don't really need you. You don't represent the voter. They're gonna get the voters who are currently supporting your candidate anyway. They're just not going to get you. They represent that tiny little statistically insignificant 1.6% that we were just talking about in a 2.1 sampling era. The rest of the people, they don't represent them, and they will, they will consolidate. So that's where it's at. 150. You know what? There's a couple of these. Let me just look at this. Yeah, Daniel Wilson said, did you see prosecutors investigating Trump are on Time magazine? These people are trash. It's amazing to me. I have not seen the Gallup Partisan Voting Index. Let's check that out. But with what Daniel was saying, let me just say this. I haven't looked into some of the law and order stuff that has become news, and I'm able to find these crazy examples, guys, that I just honestly, I feel like as a whole other world studying the unjustice system is like really jumping out at me now, that I feel like I didn't really know that much about. Statistics are one thing, but when you learn about individual stories, we've just come so far. We're falling so far. They never would have put some of these people on the cover of Time magazine that have done these some in some of the stories that I've been studying, they at one point years ago believed that they were, that those were one-off instances of prosecutorial, abuse. But the truth is, it has been going on for a very long time, and the media has been really complicit in a lot of examples that we've been able to research and uncover. And there's just so much going on. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I am just telling you guys that we are going to focus a lot on the justice system. Maybe because I also feel like I can relate to it personally. I almost myself had been railroaded, so I understand what it's like to be up against the power of the state. When they want something from you, they're going to try to get it no matter what. And you go up against them, they're going to try to hurt you. And what I have found is that there's this is something that is more common than we'd expect. And I think that because Donald Trump was prosecuted, people are just like paying attention to it now. And now would be the time to tell people that it actually has been going on for a long time. And, a lot of conservatives dismissed the concerns of, for instance, a lot of non-whites, Martin Luther King, how he was mistreated, Malcolm X, and many others. Those very same people that helped Hoover do that would later go on and attack people that were honestly trying to stop bad actors that are now a problem for the right. And it's unbelievable how long it's been going on. It really is. Like, one of Hoover's right-hand guys ends up being the chief of the law enforcement agency that oversees the Texas Rangers. And a prosecutor from a county had uncovered wrongdoing with the Texas Rangers in this entire effort to lead people into false confessions, and they indicted him over it, constant. Anyway, that right-hand man would go on to mentor people that now very well. Bob Mueller, right? And who did Bob Mueller mentor? And it was just, this slime has slowly trickled down over the years, and it's all over all these guys. And it's just been going on for a very long time. I really, again, we're going to spend more time on it because I'm not sure you can claim to be a free society with this. I mean, people say it's not perfect. It's not a perfect. I said that myself years ago. I used to say that it's not perfect, but it's a damn good one. No, it's not. It's not a good justice system at all. It's not that it's just imperfect. It's tragically flawed and unjust. This is not a just system at all. And some states are worse than others. The federal government's way worse than anything else we've seen so far statewide, but the state of Texas is really bad. Really bad. Florida, by the way, is not that great either, but Texas, I mean, there's no doubt that Texas, well, I'll wait before I say that. This is a bombshell statement, and I'm going to wait. But Florida didn't execute the way Texas executes. They do. They have the death penalty, and they did it. They implemented it. But I mean, Texas, man, you just couldn't get. I'm actually really surprised to see one reprieve George Bush did give. But in any event, I can't wait to go on this. But we are going to spend a lot more time on it because if we let this opportunity slip away, when are we ever going to do it? So just to Daniel's point, they're normalizing it, Daniel, and we have to push back on this now. And I think from polling and talking to the American people all the time, I think they're ready for it. I think you have non-whites who think they're Democrats, and I think you have whites who think they're like, super conservative. Totally in agreement on this issue. Totally in agreement. And I think you have most Americans, most normie Americans, they have no faith at all in this system. And that's why Donald Trump hasn't been destroyed yet. All these indictments, all these counts, 90-something, 91 counts, people don't believe them. They don't believe the people who are doing the work. They have no credibility anymore, so it's not hurting him. I really think that comes down to it. Polling 10,000 people with a 1% response rate, the same as polling 100 people with 100% the same. Doesn't who respond imply the bias? That's a really good question, Patrick. But the truth is no, because you still need a larger sample size to be representative. And it is better to have a larger group. That's a really good question. I have like 3 minutes. This is what I'm talking about with these videos. You can't possibly get a representative sample with 100 people, right? We just have too many groups. Now, if we were like a more uniform society, then there's an argument, that could be made that you probably could. But in this society, we're much too diverse. But that's a great point, and makes me again really believe that my original idea, which I never did, about having those short videos, really needs to get done. Is there a chance Team DeSantis fortifies the Iowa caucus? I've seen both parties attempt to steal the Iowa caucus. I saw Bernie Sanders get screwed not once, but twice. I saw Democrats build an entire app that so happened to appear to be designed to screw Bernie Sanders and state delegate equivalents being allocated correctly. But still, it wasn't 30 points. We're talking about a few points. Ted Cruz, I don't give a damn what Bob Vanderplaat says now. You can go back and look at his own damn recordings. I mean, what he made were just flat out false statements. They pulled that dirty trick, and as in a way, an electioneering scam. And it's still, we're talking again about a few points. We're only, you won the Iowa caucuses by literally a few points. Trump was only up a few points, well within most of those final poll sampling errors. So we've never seen anything like this before. It would be something so grand. It's going to raise eyebrows. And by the way, the attorney general of the state supports Trump. The governor supports DeSantis. But the one who's the attorney general and has the power to sick law enforcement on people supports Donald Trump. So if I was them, I'd be real careful. Even though the governor has enormous power, still, I mean, it's going to, if the attorney general was not supporting my candidate, I would not find it wise to try to pull that. I mean, that level of a scam, guys, is going to have holes. Oh, yeah. He's off the table. The question really, to me, only is whether or not DeSantis does end up like a Mike Pence. No, he didn't. Cruz apologized, gave a half-ass apology during a later debate. And the question is, did he ever cop to it and apologize? He gave a half-ass, I just said it, apology. Trump buried him over it. Nobody believed him. I'll tell you, Bob Vanderplaat's never apologized for those false statements. None of them did. Those campaign surrogates went on and pretended, number one, that it didn't cost Trump the caucus. It didn't cost Carson support. That's a lie. Everybody knows that's a lie. And number two, they tried to use it as a way, like Bob Vanderplaat's literally said, it didn't cost Carson any votes. That's not the reason Cruz won the caucus. It's because you can even see it in New Hampshire. Cruz is just catching fire, and he's going to win New Hampshire too. I swear to God, he said that on CNN when he was directly questioned about whether or not that scam robbed Donald Trump of the Iowa caucuses and did so at the expense of Ben Carson. By the way, why do you think evangelicals turned so hard and then Ben Carson endorsed Donald Trump? They didn't believe the bull. They didn't believe it. I actually got through all those real quick. All right, so, oh boy, Laura, I hope my voice isn't going too, girl. I feel kind of like it is. All right, but don't worry. What, do you got any announcements here, Laura? Do we? I don't think so. It's a pretty cool article that'll be coming out in the Epoch Times, I think. Unless I totally misread, the the interview, but we'll see. No, I don't think anything's on the book for this week, right? I don't want to miss pitching an appearance on someone's show if I didn't do it. But we will be talking about the Christmas poll and ethnicity more this week. As this polling misinformation stuff comes up, I'm going to whack it down like playing whack a fraud. Okay. I'm not going to spend an hour on every segment like I did this time, but I am going to, why did I? Because of the name that was pushing it, number one, and number two, the vastness of the argument, like how long he went on this tear, and then the appearance on Bill Maher. I mean, it was a long reach, of bullshit, and it required, pushback, and hopefully, he's smart enough himself to say, okay, I was wrong. And that's not right. That's incorrect. I always took him as that kind of guy. I really did. We'll see whether or not I'm proven right or wrong. Nothing in their behavior so far as a collective leads me to believe that they'll do that, but it's worth giving him at least the opportunity to say, looks like I've been corrected and I was wrong. And that's it, but we'll see. I doubt that's going to happen. Yeah. So we'll talk about the Christmas poll. We'll talk about ethnicity in the Rust Belt a lot more. And we'll have Robert Cayley on and talk about, he's got a slew of these polls coming out this week. I told him, why don't we just, probably wait until, if the schedules work, wait until they're out so you can talk about all of them if you want. It's up to him, really, but we'll figure it out. And it's 2:03. So I'm going to go kick rocks. Don't forget, if you like the videos, like them. Subscribe. Even if you subscribed on YouTube, mosey on over to Rumble. Subscribe there and vice versa. Of course, the best place to follow us, folks, is on Locals. It's peoplespundit.locals.com. peoplespundit.locals.com. That is the home to all things People's Pundit. We missed book club again yesterday. I told you during the holidays, especially, we're gonna have to reschedule some of them. I really probably gonna put out a post on Locals to see about a different time. Either that, we're just gonna miss it. Problem is, I want to get through some parts of this book before the elections really start voting, and we're running out of time to do that. So we're going to have to try to add some sessions. But with that in mind, we'll see you on Wednesday. And of course, keep your eye on the feed to let you know what's new, what's coming out, and when we're on other shows. Thanks again, of course, to our friends at Jam and Bean, JAMNBean.com. Use promo code TPP40 at checkout. And that right off the bat. Nice little holiday special. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers, folks. We'll see you on Wednesday.